South Africa built a unit that worked. It convicted 93% of every person it prosecuted. It worked financial crime cases that ran across 3 continents. It put sitting politicians in handcuffs and made them answer for it in open court. In 8 years, no one found a serious legal reason to stop it. So politicians found a political one. And because of that decision, made in a single weekend in 2007, this country lost at least 500 billion rand to corruption, and possibly 1.5 trillion. Those are not guesses. They are the published estimates of a sitting president and a national newspaper, respectively. This is the full account of what was done, why it was done, and what it cost every person living here. President Thabo Mbeki announced the unit in June of 1999. He called it a special, adequately staffed and equipped investigative unit that would deal with all national priority crime, including police corruption. The formal launch happened in Gugulethu in September of that same year, but the Directorate of Special Operations, known to every South African as the Scorpions, did not become fully operational until the 12th of January, 2001. Its design was different from anything that existed in this country before it. Prosecutors, investigators, and forensic analysts were put on the same case at the same time. The prosecutors shaped the investigation from day one, so by the time a suspect sat in court, the evidence was built precisely to what the law required to convict. They called it the Troika Model. Its critics called it a threat to the separation of powers. Its conviction rate spoke for itself. By February of 2004, the unit had completed 653 cases. Of the 380 prosecutions it had taken to court, 349 resulted in convictions. That is a conviction rate of 93.1%. Between 2005 and 2007, it initiated 368 investigations, completed 264 of them, prosecuted 214, maintained an 85% conviction rate, and seized 1 billion rand in assets and contraband. In 2002, its first full year of operation, the unit arrested 66 people. By 2006, that number had climbed to 617. These are not the numbers of a unit that was failing. They are the numbers of a unit that was succeeding at things powerful people needed to remain unsolved. The arms deal was the beginning of the end. The South African government signed a 30 billion rand military procurement contract in 1999. The Scorpions began investigating it in 2001. That investigation led to the arrest and conviction of ANC politician Tony Enjeni for corruption and to the conviction of Durban businessman Sheba Sheikh on the 8th of June, 2005, on 2 counts of corruption and 1 count of fraud.
A very technical testimony with Dr. Young giving a history of his business dealings with Armscor. It emerged that Armscor awarded him and his company a number of contracts between 1992 and 1999. But after the defense review of 1995, things changed. A rival bidder was awarded a multi-million rand defense systems contract. Young also testified that the involvement of former Chief of Acquisitions at Defense Chippy Sheikh in the 1999 armaments contract was a conflict of interest.
Sheikh was a close financial associate of then Deputy President Jacob Zuma, and the judge who convicted him found that he had paid Zuma regular bribes in exchange for political protection. Sheikh received 15 years. The legal consequence for Zuma was that President Mbeki dismissed him as deputy president shortly after. The political consequence was that Zuma began building a coalition inside the ANC to dismantle the unit that had gotten close to him. At the ANC's 52nd National Conference in Polokwane, held in December of 2007, Zuma defeated Mbeki for the party leadership. The conference had barely finished counting votes before it adopted a resolution that the Scorpions should be disbanded as a matter of urgency, in order to facilitate what was described as the constitutional imperative of a single police service.
The ANC resolved in Polokwane to push ahead with the dissolution of the Scorpions. The same investigation unit that put together the case against Jacob Zuma and National Police Commissioner Jackie Selebi.
The Scorpions in the circumstances will be dissolved and the organized crime unit of the police will be phased out and a new amalgamated unit will be created.
That unit will fall under the command of SAPS.
done in the...
At this stage, it is just a proposal. President Thabo Mbeki's cabinet must still approve it. And then it needs to pass muster in Parliament.
People don't even realize it is Mbeki who started. It is the era of Mbeki who said the scorpions must go. It is the era of
because the scorpion was beginning to fight.
Yeah, and then Zuma just came and finalized and put the nail.
Since '94, I mean, I've seen cases done by the scorpions, and I've been puzzled why the scorpions were ever involved. The cases that seemed to me rather ordinary and really should have been handled by the police. So I'm saying there's that tension. We have to deal with it at some point.
And I'll never be corrupt. Never.
At the time of this resolution, Zuma was facing more than 780 charges of corruption, racketeering, and money laundering linked to the arms deal. The Scorpions had already raided his home. They had reinstated charges against him. The resolution to destroy the unit was passed by a conference where the person who most needed that unit gone had just been elected party leader. 7 members of the ANC's National Executive Committee, its highest governing body, had already been convicted by the Scorpions. 6 more were under active criminal investigation. 536 skilled investigators, forensic experts, and prosecutors, built up over 8 years, were scattered. The Scorpions' active investigation into arms deal corruption was shut down by the unit that replaced them. That replacement was the Directorate for Priority Crime Investigation. South Africa came to call it the Hawks. The difference between the two units is measurable in court records. The Hawks' arrests dropped from over 14,000 in 2010 to just over 5,000 in 2015. Their convictions fell from over 7,000 in 2010 to just over 1,000 in 2015. These are 5-year declines of more than 50% and 80% respectively. But the most damning verdict on the Hawks did not come from a journalist or an opposition politician. It came from the Constitutional Court of South Africa. A businessman named Hugh Glenister challenged the disbanding legislation, first in 2008 and again after the laws were enacted.
We needed a special unit back. The concern obviously is the president puts it in place. If it gets too close, he can close it down. So, and I think that's an issue that we need to discuss.
His second challenge reached the Constitutional Court, which handed down its ruling on the 17th of March, 2011. The majority found that the Constitution obligates the state to establish and maintain an independent body to combat corruption and organized crime, and that the Hawks were not sufficiently independent to fulfill this obligation.
So how independent is it likely to be? Because one of you said if it gets too close, the president might shut it down again.
I think that, and also if you look at what was the Scorpions and what made the Scorpions successful, is that you had investigators, you had prosecutors, and you had analysts under one roof. The investigators were highly trained, highly educated people. A lot of them were accountants, were lawyers, etc., trained by Scotland Yard, trained by the FBI. Now, are we going to have something similar as that? Because that is what made the Scorpions successful. When other countries came to South Africa to study what we were doing, they were studying that concept, that model, and that model was broken down.
The court declared the legislation unconstitutional and gave Parliament 18 months to fix it. Parliament revised the law. Glenister challenged it again. In December of 2013, a full bench of the Cape High Court found that Parliament's revised statute still fell short of the constitutional standard. The Hawks had been declared legally broken twice. In the years that followed, they were never effectively repaired. The pattern was not confined to legislation. It ran through every appointment to the position of National Police Commissioner from 2000 onwards. Jackie Selebai held the post from 2000 until 2009. He was convicted of corruption on the 2nd of July, 2010, for accepting bribes from a drug dealer named Glenn Egliotti in exchange for classified police intelligence. He was sentenced to 15 years. He died in January of 2015, having served less than 1 year of his sentence before receiving medical parole. Becky Seal, who replaced Selebai, was fired in June of 2012 after a board of inquiry found he had been involved in an irregular 500 million rand lease deal for police headquarters. Raya Faiga, who came after him, was found unfit for office following a board of inquiry linked to the Marikana massacre, having been found to have misled investigators and allowed false evidence to be constructed. Zuma declined to act on those findings. She completed her term collecting a full salary. Komotso Folane, who served in an acting capacity from 2015, was dismissed in 2020 after being found guilty of dishonesty and corruption involving a 46 million rand contract. Every person who led the police service during the years when state capture was at its worst left that post under a cloud of misconduct, corruption, or political interference. The commission was the most expensive judicial inquiry in South African history, costing close to 1 billion rand. Its final report, 5,500 pages across 5 volumes, was handed to President Ramaphosa on the 22nd of June, 2022. The report named hundreds of individuals and companies, called for extensive criminal investigation, and documented how institutions like Eskom, Transnet, the South African Revenue Service, the Passenger Rail Agency, and the Department of Home Affairs were hollowed out. The Hawks were the agency responsible for acting on those findings. The Commission's findings on the Hawks were withering. In July of 2025, retired Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, the man who had spent 4 years chairing the State Capture Commission, made his position clear. He said that in the early 2000s, the Scorpions were highly effective and that criminals feared them. Then he said he did not believe the Hawks were up to their job. He used a specific example. The Passenger Rail Agency of South Africa Board, under Chair Popo Molefe, had gone to the Hawks in 2017 with criminal complaints backed by statements and evidence. When the Commission handed in its final report in early 2022, 5 years later, no arrests had been made. The Hawks told the Commission they were still investigating. Zondo said that the explanation from the head of the Hawks for this delay was completely inadequate, and that as of 2025, no arrests had been made. His conclusion was direct. His faith in the Hawks, he said, was not the same as the faith he had in the Scorpions. The cost of this institutional failure has a price tag, though estimates vary depending on what is measured. By the time South Africa was grey-listed by the Financial Action Task Force in 2023 for failing to demonstrate the ability to investigate and prosecute complex financial crime, the damage to the country's international standing was not hypothetical. It was documented. Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana stated publicly that the single biggest obstacle to removal from that grey list was the ongoing failure of South African law enforcement to handle complex financial crime cases, the same law enforcement infrastructure that had replaced the Scorpions. By early 2025, of the 44 state capture cases being managed through the legal system, only 4 had been finalized in court with guilty verdicts. Spending on VIP protection for a few hundred politicians came to 3.76 billion rand in a single financial year. The Hawks' entire budget for the same period was 2.2 billion rand. The institution that was supposed to hold power to account was being outspent by the budget that protected power from accountability. The Scorpions were not perfect. Critics raised legitimate concerns about their public profile in active investigations and the tension between their investigative and prosecutorial roles. These were real governance questions that deserved real answers. None of the answers that existed in 2007 required the unit to be destroyed. The record is contained in court judgments, commission findings, arrest statistics, conviction figures, and the published estimates of how much money left public hands and never came back. The unit that worked was removed because it worked. The unit built to replace it was broken before it started, declared unconstitutional by the country's own courts, and never structurally fixed. In the space that opened between those two facts, 1.5 trillion rand moved in the wrong direction. And the people who needed that money most, in schools, in clinics, in housing, in electricity, are still waiting for it to come back.